Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're going to talk about Sony ZV-E1. So let's dive right into it. So what is this puppy? This puppy is a low-cost, full-frame vlogging camera. Let me be very clear. It's not a basically full-frame hybrid camera. It's a video camera that can do a little bit of photography. And it's a low-cost system, meaning for full-frame you are paying relatively less. And this puppy can do 4K 60 FPS. Now be mindful, there are very few cameras that can do full-frame 4K 60 FPS uncropped. Very few. So this does that. And Canon R8 also does that. Sony did not have anything that can do that for low cost. They did have cameras that can do that, for example A7S3, but that puppy was idiotically expensive. So this puppy can do the same thing for much lower cost. So it has 12 megapixel. Basically core was copy pasted directly from A7S3. You just Control C, Control V here. So it's 12 megapixel. And in terms of, even though it's a cheap camera, it does not cheap out on terms of data of video. It has 4:2 color sampling and 10-bit, meaning for 99.99% of the things, it's more than good enough, meaning you're gonna get your job done. It does have a clean HDMI output or even high quality HDMI output, so you can do even more if you desire to do so. So this camera is basically, some engineers in Sony company is going there and they're like looking at the catalog of products they have. They looked at A7S3, they took the sensor from there. They looked at the main board of A7R5 and they Control C, Control V these two things. Basically, what is this? If you have ever used A7S3, that's the video output. If you have ever used A7R5, that's the processing ability of this puppy. So exactly same thing. And they're gonna also add 4K 120 FPS. However, it's very odd that they have not released it, even though all the hardware, all the processor, everything is pre-done. That function will be unlocked, quote unquote, in June 2023. They're gonna release a new basically firmware for it. However, I have checked the Sony's website and Sony did say in India it will be basically unlocked for free, but in some parts it could require some payment. I'm not sure and I have no idea why the heck this is this stupid, but it's there. So be aware of that. In your country, you may have to pay for it. Now, targeted price is $2,200. So not super cheap, but not hyper expensive, not like $4,000, $5,000. So kind of good. And it translates to 1.8 lakh rupees. Significant amount of jump change, and to roughly translate it, that translates to the price of Canon R8. So this is the main puppy that we are talking. It's a small body, full frame sensor, and it has single card slot, USB-C, headphone and microphone and micro HDMI, and a really good basically microphone port, and that's it. It's a vlogging camera first. So what is it? It's like more or less the same thing. If the core is the same, the output is the same. So their core focus was ease of use. You have to understand this. All camera company are garbage. They are pure 100% useless in terms of user interface. Meaning user interface of cameras never crossed 2000. Like fundamentally, I'm not even joking. It took Sony 15 years to realize that, oh, you have a touch screen, you can use it. And this is their latest innovation, quote unquote, that you can swap things and in and out. I'm like, Nikon, basically Nokia used to make smartphone, Android smartphone. Back then they had that sort of technology. Like, and why Sony is putting so much effort here? Here's the many of the old generation like me, people who are around in 30s, we had nothing. Then we went into DSLR, then we went to mirrorless. So mirrorless is fundamentally much better than what we used to have. But people who are young, they are coming from their phones to camera, and their first experience is like, I'm gonna take this and yeet it. And the reason for that is not the performance. Let me be very clear. Performance got tier. The user interface is like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, are you really, like, are you seriously kidding me? It's like, it took some engineers, is like, you know what would be nice if we had swapping gestures. I'm like, whoa. It's like, oh, we can pull out, like, if we click aperture, we pull it out and swap. I'm like, have you seen any Android phone from last 15 years? We had this. It should have been there on day one, but that's what they are focusing on, because more and more people are jumping from mobile phone to this and they are throwing it away. So that's the core point. That's what Sony is focusing on. Okay, we, instead of giving you 100% useless user interface, we're gonna give you 90% useless user interface. So what about autofocus? Thankfully, Sony in that department is really good, and that was the biggest difference. Basically, my ancient Canon 800D has really good autofocus. It was like first APS-C that had dual pixel autofocus. Really good, really reliable, useful, does work. And mobile phone, smartphones took some serious time to reach that level. Nowadays, cameras have reached a point where they're like, all of them are very good. Like, close your eyes and trust it. 99% of the time it would be good. So what does companies do? Well, they add extra to it for AI processing. What does that mean? That simply means back in the days, like even my camera, all it is doing is taking a signature mask of my this whole image and then trying to find my eyes and focusing on that. Or in case of old camera, it's trying to focus on face because it has like much higher definition, so it's focusing on face autofocus. Now we have eye autofocus. So what this AI does, AI creates a skeleton. Basically, it's not only focusing on where is my eye, it's also creating a rough mathematical approximation of my skeleton. The benefit of that is that if I turn, the autofocus will not move because it knows that my skull has this sort of geometry. So it will be this much area. It will not have focus hunting because like, oh, I lost the eye, I cannot know what I'm doing. It's like, I got this. So it can maintain focus even if somebody's back is turned. So that's fundamentally good. Now in this scenario, I cannot replicate it. But if you are doing in outdoor shooting, this makes a tangible difference. So this goes from 90% awesome to 95% awesome. So autofocus, let me be very clear. Fundamentally, Sony autofocus was really good, really reliable, especially in low light. And now it's like, bro, I got this. At this point in time, these two sensor and that extra puppy is like, bro, I got this. You do not have to die to it. Meaning, if you are having a doubt, there could be a chance you have a defective product or broken lens. Other than that, nothing else should give you a issue with autofocus. It has better time-lapse function. Again, it's a very easy user interface system. Now be mindful, it has better time-lapse compared to all other cameras, not compared to your mobile phone. Your mobile phone will bitch slap this. Better touch user interface. Yeah, it's like they are surprised we are doing this innovator. And I'm like, innovation. So, and it does have multi interface shoe. Now be mindful, it's already there in Sony, but they are never given this puppy into cheaper bodies. So this has this benefit. If you are in a scenario where you need 4 audio inputs, you can do that. Meaning you can attach a basically XLR output system where you can directly power 2 phantom powered mics, and you can have stereo jack where you are adding 2 extra mics to it. Benefit of that, you can directly feed 4 audio systems. That's awesome. For some people who need that, they're like, shut up and take my money. That's why that shoe is important. On top of that, you can buy shotgun microphone that are from Sony itself, will directly plug on this, no extra wire. Like for example, I'm using Rode Wireless Go 2, it has a cable coming out here. Don't worry about that. Sony also releases a wireless package also. So those little things makes a vlogger's life exponentially easier. And this is one good thing that I truly practically admire in Sony, is that somewhere as early as like A7 Mark III, they learned that batteries are a big issue with cameras, especially with DSLR. Like they have 10,000 models of it. It's like stupid how many battery models are there. But what Sony did is like, okay, every model going forward will have Z100, the end. Full frame equals Z100. What does that mean? That simply means you can have a whole ecosystem where people who have dedicated camera for resolution, dedicated camera for video, dedicated camera for hybrid, and all of them will have one battery, Z100. That's awesome. Like if you buy the highest end APS-C, they also give you Z100. So it's a really, really good system, meaning you're gonna get really quality system, and you can buy multiple batteries, multiple chargers without breaking a bank. And if you are in multi-camera equipment system, basically working as a team, you don't even have to worry about it. So it's really, really good. For professionals, it's like, shut up, take money. And it has top quality onboard microphone. Now be very mindful. Audio is one of those things that money is no object for people who are serious about it. I did not even knew the shotgun microphone that Sennheiser sells that are like freaking more expensive than a car. Like I did not even knew that. Like this, I thought this is expensive, like a Rode Wireless Go 2, but turns out this is chump change. So there is a world of audio. Let's not talk about that. But here's the deal. When you are a starter, onboard mics are 100% useless. This sort of setup is seriously expensive. So what the hell are you gonna do? So this is a very good middle ground where you have 3 mic capsules running on very good algorithms to give you actually useful audio. Now, is it as good as, let's say, Rode Wireless Go 2 or any other dedicated system? Hell no. But is it better than every other camera's onboard system? Undeniably so. So for many people who was like, I just pull out my camera and I shoot, this is like, shut up and take my money. So everything in this is boosted. Other than the user interface. User interface is finally catching to 2005 touchscreen. So that's the aspect of it. So what was this AI? Now this time they went kind of YOLO on it, and they have clear zoom. Now be mindful, the moment you say that clear zoom to a professional, they're gonna detonate dynamite up your ass. So don't say that. Now it's specifically for vloggers. Basically they're gonna take a frame and crop it. Now has it been done? Yes, it's a very common technology, and many times it has been used in drones. So let's say you want a 4K image, you need 8 megapixel. But if your sensor itself is 8 megapixel, you cannot crop in. Like you have to literally take an image, stretch it out. So what they used to do is generally put a giant ass sensor, meaning put a sensor that is 24 megapixel, then crop a area of 8 megapixel and go YOLO on it. That's awesome. Like that's how, if you ever wondered how the heck GoPros and all that jazz have some amazingly stable videos, that's how it's coming. Basically, it's taking a full frame and electronically moving it. Because you are moving it electronically, you're moving it per frame units, and it's very sharp, very reliable, very awesome. So they are doing this. Now clear zoom, because the sensor is only 12 megapixel, meaning if you crop it a little bit, around 10%, you already reach 8 megapixel mark, meaning you cannot go any further. You will break 1 to 1 pixel ratio. So if you shoot 4K 120 FPS, that 10% crop, because it's doing pixel reading, directly it's reading the pixel, it's not doing any mathematics to it. But this is much smaller than that, it's 30%. So what does this mean? This simply means it's getting around, let's say roughly 4 megapixel or 5 megapixel image, and then stretching that puppy to 8 megapixel. So it is a system that no professional will touch it, let me be very clear. But for vloggers and for majority of people who are making quote unquote vlog materials, most of the consumption is happening in mobile phone that is this tiny, like more than good enough. So that's an acceptable feature for those sort of audience. And because it is dynamic activation and this puppy can move much more efficiently, it's one of the best in-body image stabilization, meaning the only way you can even beat this is you have to go into Panasonic with a very high quality lens, with a very high quality IBIS. Only then you can have something like this. But be mindful, doing this does give you stabilization, but at the penalty of 30% zoom, meaning you have to buy the lens that is 16mm, put it like this, then also it may not give you that wide field of view. That's the penalty. But in body, basically you pull out of your pocket, use it, it's awesome. And one of the things that I'm pretty sure some engineer was like, okay, I will show people what we can do, is they has what we call auto depth of field. What does that mean? That simply means we already have settings where ISO automatically adjusts, aperture automatically adjusts. Somebody is like, hey, what if we study that data? Meaning, because it has AI sensor, and that AI sensor is important. Meaning if your lens is at, like, let it loop, come on, bye, shoo, shoo, yeah. So it will drop to f1.2. So at f1.2, everything is blurry. But even in that blurry state, because of that AI processor, it can study the skeleton, figure out everything, and have an understanding that, okay, there is a second face in the scene. So it's like it will change the aperture. Instead of f1.2 or white is the widest your lens can do, it will start to drop it down, and until the second face is in sharpness. Now here's the deal: if you drop down the aperture, quote unquote, it messes up with the exposure. So compensate that drop of light, it's increasing the ISO. So ISO is starting at, like, let's say for example 120, 125, and it starts to go up. That the moment aperture is changing, this valve is going up. So one is going down, one other is going up. Benefit, both people will be in focus. It's the first time I'm saying. I've seen this many times. This is the first time I'm seeing this. Like, somebody was like, oh, allow me to show you. This is really good. Like, it's having two knobs and like adjusting them dynamically, and that's only possible because it has skeleton detection. Again, it's not, they're not gonna say it has skeleton, but that's what they are showing, that mathematical representation. It's like it has skeleton, and that's the only reason why it will not get confused by something else. And it can even do, like, you have that clear zoom scenario, it can even do as an interview mode, meaning if somebody is there in like behind the camera, they can tap in basically face A or face B, and this will do the zoom in this thing, but you can do it based on face. People get paid to do this in terms of basically TV studios. Now, right now it's not automatic. They are still giving you a dumb controls where it's like, zoom in and zoom out every 30 seconds. I'm pretty sure by some firmware they may even add like maybe a remote control where it's like, person A, person B. So you are doing like, I'm here, some other person is like, he's talking, so I'll press the B, it will focus on that. Then I start talking, I press A, it will focus on me. Can be done. So it's a really useful tool for vloggers. Not for professionals. Professional may enjoy this part. This part they will generally enjoy, that aperture change. So if they need to do what we call a run and gun shoot, they may enjoy this. So what about versus A7 Mark IV? Why I'm comparing to A7 Mark IV? Because the cost is very close to it. Now be mindful. This camera looks amazing. From outside it looks whoa. Everybody's like A7 S3 in such a low cost A7 R5 kind of AI chip. So cheap, awesome. But here's the deal, that puppy is hot, meaning it does not have a magnesium body, it has a plastic body. Fundamentally, it's insulated. The processor cannot dump the heat, and it does not even have a heat dissipation. Basically, heat sink is not there. So that's why it's so cheap. Consequence, it overheats even in the places which is cold to me. Basically, people who are talking 22 degrees Celsius, 25 degrees Celsius, it overheats in those sort of scenario. Even though at this point in time Sony has a reputation where it's like Sony does not overheat, especially in cold scenario, it does overheat. Meaning if you come to India, like this is just a rough idea. Delhi could be 48 degrees Celsius, Lucknow 48 degrees Celsius, Patna a bit cool of 45 degrees Celsius, Hyderabad really cool temperature of 39 degrees Celsius, Ahmedabad 46. If you are living in India, basically like I am, this camera is flat out no. Like fundamentally you have to be in a scenario where it's like, oh, I'm only gonna shoot indoors in air conditioned environment, only then I can trust it. Yes, it does not have a recording limit, but there is a very good chance at this sort of elevated temperature that I deal in, it will overheat before I even like start to do it. So that is one thing that everyone who's living in a country which is hot, be very mindful of it. The cost cutting, that's where it did the majority of cost cutting. And that 120 FPS delay, it's very awkward to me. It's like, why? You have the processor, you have the sensor, you have already done 120 FPS output of it. Why the heck that delay? And the fact that we're gonna charge somewhere, we're not gonna charge somewhere, it's like, is there a law that recently passed that like 120 FPS we're gonna charge more? It's like, because I was not aware of it. So that's very questionable. On top of that, in terms of relative price, it's almost 85 to 90% of the cost of A7 Mark IV. So let's compare it to A7 Mark IV. Now A7 Mark IV gives you electronic viewfinder. Now be mindful, all these camera companies, be it Nikon, be it Canon, be it Sony, they are garbage. In terms of their display, you will be shocked how low brightness these things are. Even though they have giant batteries, these are horrible, meaning if you are doing in broad daylight, especially in India, the displays are like, I can't say it. Now, at that point in time, the development of electronic viewfinder helps you. You put your eye here, you have a complete shade, you can see everything clearly, you can figure out your exposure is right, you can even watch a video, and that's the benefit of having mirrorless. You can truly enjoy this. So letting this puppy go, let EVF go, may not be as desirable as you may think. Another, dual card slot, meaning if you're doing anything where you cannot do retake, you have to have dual card slot. You have to have this puppy. Now, this is not most amazing puppy out there, but something is better than nothing. You will never find a server where it's like, I only have one of everything. Never. That just, nope. This is important, especially if you are doing any sort of wedding and all that jazz, where you really do not want to get boomed because your card failed, and it does fail, and you're like, oh, I never had a failure. That means the failure is gonna happen in your future. It's a fixed event timeline wise. It's gonna happen. Question is, either it did happen or it's gonna happen. And there are only two types of people, who have lost their data or who gonna lose their data. So be mindful. And once that happens, you will learn very quickly why every camera company, be it Sony, Nikon, Canon, or every company, when they are dealing with serious stuff, they always have redundancy. That's the whole point. Dual card slot does matter. Another is 33 megapixel stills, means it's actually a competent stills camera also. Full size HDMI output. This camera has better basically webcam protocol, so it can output 4K 30 FPS. That's awesome. This cannot do that. Basically, A7 Mark IV cannot do that. It can only do 4K 15 FPS output, almost useless. So you have to do HDMI. Now, thankfully, it does have HDMI clean output and full size HDMI, meaning full size useful, like actually useful. I do not have any idea why the heck they have micro in that. So this is one of those things. Now, you're like, what about those other features that are making your life easier? The only true function that I can notice is 4K 60 FPS, uncropped. Yes, if you need that, you have no other choice. Either this or you have to go to Canon. So that I do understand. It does have webcam. Again, you may be like, hey, I do not want to buy an extra card or like USB HDMI capture and all that. I do understand that. At that point in time, I do get it. You're like, hey, I do not want extra hassle. I plug the cable, plug on this, just use it. Now be mindful, it will overheat in 40 minutes. That's another thing. But I do get it. If you have that sort of thought, I do get it. So most things are just software add-on, like those touchscreen enhancer. I do love it, but like it's like, why? But you can live without it. What about that, image stabilizing? You can put a gimbal. And for example, if you're doing any architectural photography or architectural basically video, which many people do, at that point in time, if you're gonna do that 30% crop in, you have to buy ultra hyper, like you have to buy a fisheye lens at that point in time. Or you can just use a gimbal, so you get true representation. So you can add stabilization to it. That's not that big of a wow factor. Yes, it does increase hassle of your work, but it does improve the quality of the work. And not having that digital zoom in especially if you are gonna show your work on TVs, like people are gonna sit down and watch it. At that point in time, that clear zoom may be like, not bad, but it's like, not really that useful. So be very mindful of that. In between these two cameras, for most people, A7 Mark IV still would be better choice. Yes, you are gonna give a 4K 60 FPS, but almost other things is like minor inconvenience. And be mindful, this camera has been out for surprisingly long time, so you may be able to buy this for lower cost. So that's one of those things. And this puppy endures Indian heat much better compared to every other places. So be mindful. We do live in cool places. It's not very hot. Like the hottest I have seen is only 51 degrees Celsius. Not that hot, but be mindful. Sony will not like this. Not like this Indian scenario unless you are shooting in indoors. So this was my presentation on ZV, the new full frame launch. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst a friend. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.